Okay, everybody, welcome to another episode of On This from Off the Cuff. Today we have a really fun comparison for you guys at a very particular price point, and I'd say a very particular, I guess, style of watch, but two very different approaches and two very different executions overall from two brands that are actually more similar than you might think. Besides the fact that Oak and Oscar and Monta are both, considered premium micro brands, they really, I feel like they have very different customer bases and very different clientele, although I do think there is some crossover. Like myself, I actually would love to own both watches. That is my personal Monta Triumph on the left, and this is a loaner review unit from Oak and Oscar there on the right, and I would eventually like to purchase the white dial variant for my own collection. But basically both of these brands were founded in the US back in 2015, which is pretty crazy. Both are enthusiast run, and both pretty much kind of focus on putting out, high quality watches, and they're not really trying to be the cheapest watch with the most features by any means. There are definitely other watches that do that are in that sweet kind of $700 and under, the $500 sweet spots. There's tons of micro brand sweet spots. This is kind of pushing it. I think a lot of people, when they look at these watches, depending on kind of where they're coming from and where their head's at, some of them might see these as being a little overpriced, and some might see them as being a huge bargain, which I think is so much fun about both of these brands. So with all that said, let's go ahead and take a closer look and kind of just compare notes on these and kind of see what makes them alike, but what also makes them very different. Okay, so both of these watches, of course, come in right around $1,500 on bracelet anyway. So, they're in a very similar space. They offer, obviously, kind of derived from classic field watch looks, but definitely, Monta has tried to take it more of a kind of luxurious route, while Oak and Oscar's really just try to do more of just more of a modern overhaul, while also improving upon quality, but not necessarily in the same kind of the same style that you'll see from the Monta. I think overall what Monta's done in this space is really focus on giving you a very near luxury experience for a lot less. So something like, when you think about, let's say, the Black Bay 36 compared to by Tudor, of course, if you're not a big watch fan, you can Google that. Then you compare that to something like the Rolex Explorer 36, right? You compare those two watches, and they're both trying to do the same thing, but of course at different price points. I feel like the next step logically is actually the Monta, and I think it actually outshines the Tudor Black Bay 36 in a lot of ways, with the execution as well as bang per buck. But really, I think that's where the big difference in approach is, because when you look at Oak and Oscar, they're not really trying to do sorry about that, coronavirus 2020. No, I don't, it's not the coronavirus, it's actually seasonal allergies, but coronavirus is of course a huge thing right now as of this date while I'm filming this on the 20th of January, February, March. So March. Anyways, guys, I think where Oak and Oscar really differs when you kind of think about them as far as branding and their execution goes, Oak and Oscar was really trying to kind of just do a premium version, not necessarily a luxurious version by virtue, but maybe luxurious after you kind of add everything up, everything that they've done. It's luxurious in its advancements and its fine details and design over, your basic field watch, especially kind of one that you could consider in that everyday 38 millimeter, because this is a 38, this is a 38 and a half, but they actually do have quite different proportions when you look at the bezel to dial proportions there. You can see there, although they're only half a millimeter difference, they actually look quite different, especially when you look at the shape of the lugs and whatnot. But when you look at the proportions as far, let's say, on the bracelet, you can see some similarities there, tapering down to 16 millimeters from a 20 millimeter lug width. Really, really nice. I'd say a nice comparable that I think a lot of the industry would be used to, although not a micro brand by any means. Zen, being an independent brand that's very well known. They have a lot of street cred. This is pretty much the gold standard if you're going to spend $1,500 up to $1,500 on, let's say, kind of an everyday overdone sports watch. And when I say overdone, I mean that in the most complimentary way. It's giving you a lot of features that you don't need, but they're definitely very, very nice to have. And I think actually the Oak and Oscar probably compares very closely with this when you think about the 38 millimeter footprint. This is actually 38.5 as well. But I think they have very similar dimensions as far as their proportions go. You got the drilled lugs. You have definitely more of that kind of tool finish where they're not really trying to be luxurious. It's just trying to be excellent, right? It's just executed very, very well. It's just not in a way that's very showy or ornate. It's a very just clean, minimalist aesthetic when it comes to the design as well as the execution and the finishing there. So I did want to pull that onto screen so for those of you that might have kind of a measuring stick on what you consider for watching Strange. There's plenty of people that are happy to pay, $1,200 to $1,400 for this watch right here on this very simple bracelet with a stamped clasp and milled folding section there. So I think it is worthy to bring that onto the stage here. Also, one thing to note is that this watch has a 28-24 in it, although it is a top grade and whatnot. These two, basically, their movements are based on the higher level, which is the 2892, as you can see in the Oak and Oscar there. So it's much thinner, just higher spec in general. And then you have the Sellita SW300. Although now you can actually get, depending, it's not really an option, but Monta has actually switched over to kind of branding their movements. It's the Monta M22 because they'll actually just use, based on availability, they'll either use an ETA or a Sellita. That just goes to show how much faith they have in the Sellita movement and the brand. That they don't. A lot of brands will actually consider that kind of an upcharge to put an ETA in there. Monta will just do it, as what's available to move units. So they definitely have a great relationship with Sellita, and I have to say, I'm definitely in agreement that this movement is just a higher caliber, in general, let's say over an ETA 2824 or a Sellita SW200. So this series of movements are definitely nicer. But again, just to kind of compare notes on these, the nice thing is they both do have that female end link, so you're not extending out that lug to lug width. As you can see, they're both relatively slim, with the Monta being just a hair thinner at 9.2 millimeters versus about 10.8. But it's honestly, it's not the most easiest thing to read when you're cutting millimeters. But you can see this is a thinner watch, but it's meant to be very thin. I think the Oak and Oscar here is more a result of the thinness because of the movement choice versus consciously really trying to be thin. I think this watch is more about the design and kind of everything coming together separately versus here you really just have a large focus on just every little detail and from I guess it just feels like a different lens. They just have really different approaches. When you think about Monta, right, it comes in this heavy box, this hardwood box with all the goodies, a very traditional luxury experience, except you're getting a lot of bells and whistles for free. You're gonna get, well, both of them will offer you premium NATO straps with the bracelets, but you get a very I guess kind of more of a watch geek experience when you purchase a Monta. It's definitely very much in the vein of traditional horological values, as far as the way the package is, even the way the branding is. When you go to the website, it's, although very very much modern and up to date, and I think they do a great job with that. It definitely is a watch enthusiast brand. Everything about Monta is about Monta watches. Now, Oak and Oscar, I think that's where they really differ, in that they focus on, although their timepieces are great, I think even when you look at their packaging, right, like they have this watch wallet, it doesn't come in, a big box or anything. They want to be a little bit more modern and try to make things, just very, very driven around function, and kind of reinventing some of the excess, let's say, from a traditional Swiss brand. And I think that's also cool too. And I think Oak and Oscar, when you think of it, it's very much a lifestyle brand as well. Even when you watch videos of their owner, Chase, and kind of his outlook on things, his take on things, I think it's very clear that they're more than just a brand that delivers really nice watches. They're an overall just a lifestyle brand that is associated with high quality gear and not necessarily timepieces. So there could be guys who aren't really into watches that would love to buy this Oak and Oscar and don't even know what a Swiss movement is. They just know, like, oh well, I want a good piece of kit, right? And that could be this, because there's, I mean, believe me, guys, there are knives out there that cost $2,000, and there are pens out there that costs $800. So a watch for $1,500 that's mechanical is actually not too far out of the realm for somebody that's not even into watches. If they're just into having very premium, high quality gear on their person, then that's, I think this could really fit the bill for them. Versus I think Monta, what they offer you is very much, a very luxurious experience, what you expect when you put on an Omega Aquaterra or a Rolex Explorer. It's giving you a very similar experience in its fine details, in its overall message, and I think even in its design aesthetic, it's giving you something just a little bit more familiar, versus the Oak and Oscar not really trying to be a more attainable or affordable version of something existing at a higher tier. It's more so trying to be a premium version of something existing in a lower tier. So you think about the Hamilton Khaki, right? And if you were just to completely pimp that thing out, it could be this Olmsted 38 versus the Khaki Field 38. Here you think, man, you take like an Aquaterra and an Explorer, and you try to get to 90% of that, that quality and that experience, but at a fraction of the costs, so not to say that Monta's trying to be the cheaper version of something else, but just really a more attainable version of something that in this day and age isn't necessarily the easiest thing to justify, spending a ton of money on a luxury timepiece. And honestly, this is everyday luxury. So I think that's kind of the big difference here. I feel like Oak and Oscar definitely screams premium, while Monta is screaming more luxury, if that makes any sense. So with that said, let's actually go ahead and get these guys on wrist and, get into kind of how they wear and a little bit of that side of the experience. Okay, as you can see, very similar wear experience with the Monta, although being thinner, more of a flat case versus the more contoured case on the Olmsted, which is going to wrap around the wrist a little bit. And then let's actually check out the lug to lug on, let's see, it's like a 49 point, so a little slightly shorter lug to lug as well on the Oak and Oscar, but really beautiful. And I mean, this is one of my favorite watches that I own. I actually kind of have to talk myself out of wearing it probably as often as I would if I wasn't a YouTuber and had like freaking over 100 watches to put in a rotation, plus stuff that I'm being loaned to put in a rotation so that I can get an idea of how it wears and the experience, so I can review them and get some shots and whatnot and share with you guys. So, but I mean, guys, these are great watches. They wear really, really well. And honestly, in comparison, to something like this, to my Zen, it gets left out. I honestly don't wear this as much. You guys might, if you're fans of the channel, you might know that I recently compared this to the newer Seiko Alpinist. And, you know, it's a very similar experience you get with the Alpinist and with the Zen, because they're both, I mean, the Zen is a tool watch almost to a fault. It's really, it's just not trying to be more than it is. It just happens to just be completely over engineered. It's an engineering feat, guys. Look at the hex screws on those solid links. It even has like a milled extension in this clasp, which isn't the greatest clasp, but you know, it's proportional and looks good, feels good. It's just kind of a bit of a pain as far as the open and close. I think it could be a little bit better engineered, a little bit more premium to go with the price. But you know what? It's part of kind of the German thing, is to have that minimalist, not only the aesthetic, but even the finish and everything like that. They're not about a lot of ornate details. I mean, the most ornate details on here come from its Swiss movement. So, but you know, as much as everybody raves about this watch and they say, hey, if you're going to spend the money, automatically, this is kind of the default recommendation. I really, for me, these are I mean, if somebody says I got to spend $1,500 on a watch, new, guys, new. Let's preface that. There's a lot of people that want to compare apples to oranges, and compare, you know, used prices and this and that, gray market prices to retail. These are watches you buy directly from the company. So we're talking, this is the full retail price you're purchasing it for, versus something that you're going to go into a boutique or go online, get gray market, or go online and get used, right? And bargain with somebody. So these are really outstanding timepieces. They wear really fantastically. Even up close, you can see typically wristies make watches look a little bit oversized, but as you can see here, these are just two really fantastic watches that wear really, really well. So let's actually go ahead and move into some low light transition and some loom shots. Okay, let's go ahead and hit the lights. As you can see, both of them sporting BGW9, glowing really, really nicely. And they're both quite legible, even at kind of an off-tilt angle here, as you can see. You still have nice orientation towards the 12 o'clock, even though you only have the Arabic numerals on the Oak and Oscar Olmsted. Now, one thing I like to do in these low light transitions is really give you a look at how the colors render on these watches outside of kind of your, you know, really very nice full studio lighting, which is very comparable to direct sunlight, because you're not always going to be in direct sunlight, right? You're going to sometimes be in a low light transition, coming in and out of buildings, in and out of vehicles, whatnot. But another thing that you can really see here is the finishing, and what a lot of people mentioned in my Oak and Oscar Olmsted review was they were disappointed that I didn't mention the Triumph bracelet, because they're both fully articulated. They just drape super well. They have a similar taper, and there's really, you know, I want to pay respect, of course, to each watch on their own. You know, not every watch video is a head-to-head. Not even this one, honestly. I think it's kind of funny that people really kind of pit these watches against each other, when I think they're really both just great examples of the fact that micro brands can offer you such high quality timepieces that offer you more than just high spec, but even a particular wear experience, a user experience. You know, as an end user, as an enthusiast, what these watches offer you is something that does dip its toes into what traditional, you know, long time favorite brands have been able to do, whether it's being kind of that hip and that kind of cutting edge and off, you know, off color choice, like, let's say a Tudor, you know, if you own a Tudor, you're kind of hip, right? Versus owning a Rolex. It's one of those things within kind of the watch community that exists. And same thing with like a Zin, right? It's this thing. There's a little bit more to it. It's not just an amalgamation of its specs and its components. The Zen 556 is just a really special timepiece altogether as a package. So I feel like that's kind of the story here. It's instead of trying to figure out how pitting one of these watches versus the other makes the other one inferior, I'd say the real point I want you guys to take away from this video is that if you were planning on buying a Zen or an Oris for around the same money, or a Longines, give these guys a look. Give Oak and Oscar or Monta a crack. If you were thinking about getting a Black Bay 36, I'd love it if they came out with a 38. I would probably instantly buy it and review it just to pit it against my Monta. But they don't currently. But I think the 36 should still be pretty comparable. Just because of the case shape. You know, there's those watches that are out there. Yeah, sure, you can get them used. Sure, you can get them gray market, this and that. But again, let's go apples to apples. If you're buying it directly from the manufacturer, from the brand name, you know, the brand owners, you're buying it directly from the brand website. If you're doing that, then the prices are a lot different, guys. Let's not compare Joma Shop's, you know, sales or Ashford sales you can get for Rado or Longines or Oris, to what you're getting here when you're getting a watch that is backed by the owners directly, by, you know, by their brand here stateside, right? Obviously, if you're in the United States, it's probably more of a value proposition for you versus if you're in Europe. And I have had a lot of people on my channel comment in the comment section that they wish that these watches were available in Europe so they wouldn't have to pay VAT to have them shipped to Europe, because then it just becomes a little bit of a tougher value proposition when you're trying to really justify spending the money. But for me, if you're in the US, I think these watches are well worth the money. I think we'll see them slowly increase in price. And I just, I wouldn't be surprised. And the same way we've seen Christopher Ward increase in prices over time. We've seen Seiko increase in prices. Well, everybody. I mean, Oris and Zen, they're increasing in prices definitely as well. So for me, I think these pieces are really great examples of just awesome watches you can get at a really attainable price. I won't say affordable, because not everybody wants to spend $1,500 on a watch. Let's face it. In this day and age, there's people that get just as much enjoyment, from a Casio that costs $30 on Amazon. But I think if you kind of know what you're looking for and you know what you're getting into, and your end goal is to really have these watches be a real part of kind of, your style identity and kind of things that you keep on your person to tell a story, from your pocket knife to your handkerchief to, just the roll of chapstick you might have in your pocket every day. These watches really tell a story, I think, and they really say something about the people that wear them. And the nice thing is that story is still being written, as opposed to something like a Tag Heuer where you wear that, or even a Rolex, right? There's definitely some certain negative connotations that go with being a Rolex wearer. None of those really exist with these brands, at least not yet. And it takes a whole pile of success for those types of connotations to happen. So I don't think they would really be against, getting to that echelon of branding either. But you know what, guys? Let me know what you think in the comments below. I know this was a little bit of a long one. That's what she said. But if you like the video, please do hit like, and if you're not subscribe for more content just like this, definitely let me know what you guys think in the comments below. All right, thanks guys, bye.